Section 7. Red Flags and Preventive Measures, Protecting Arizona from Deed Fraud, where awareness turns into action. Up to this point, you understand how fraud works, who commits it, and where it enters the transaction. Now comes the most important skill, recognizing it in real time and stopping it. This section is where knowledge becomes action. Deed fraud is rarely obvious, but it leaves patterns, behaviors, and inconsistencies that trained professionals can identify. The key is not just knowing what fraud is, but knowing what it looks like while it is happening. This is your moment as a professional, because the difference between a successful fraud and a stopped transaction is often one person asking one more question. Understanding red flags. Fraud leaves. Clues. Fraud does not appear as a flashing warning sign. It appears as something slightly off. It may be subtle at first. A rushed timeline. A seller who refuses to meet. Documents that look correct but feel inconsistent. These are not coincidences. They are signals. One of the most common red flags is urgency. Fraudsters often push for quick closings, limited verification, or last-minute changes. They rely on speed to prevent professionals from slowing down and asking questions. Another major indicator is identity inconsistency. A client who cannot provide multiple forms of identification, avoids video calls, or communicates only through email should immediately raise concern. Documentation discrepancies are also critical. Mismatched signatures, inconsistent names, unusual property descriptions, or missing information are all indicators that something is not right. Key insight: fraud is rarely perfect, but it is often good enough to pass if no one is paying attention. High-risk property profiles, where fraud starts. Certain types of properties are consistently targeted by fraudsters. Vacant properties are at the top of the list because they are not actively monitored. Fraudsters can manipulate documents and even access the property without immediate detection. Properties with little or no mortgage are also high risk because they have equity that can be exploited without interference from lenders. Elderly owners are another vulnerable group, especially if they are not actively managing their property or are more trusting of requests for signatures or information. Real-world example: a vacant property owned by an out-of-state individual is targeted by a fraudster who impersonates the owner. The transaction appears normal, and without regular monitoring, the fraud is not discovered until after the property has been sold. Preventive measures for property owners. Prevention begins with awareness and consistency. Property owners should regularly monitor their property records through the county recorder and assessor's office to ensure no unauthorized changes have occurred. Title protection services provide an additional layer of security by alerting owners when a new deed or mortgage is recorded. These alerts allow for immediate action before fraud escalates. Title insurance is another critical protection, covering financial losses and legal costs associated with title defects, including fraud. Some owners may also choose to place an encumbrance or restriction on their property title, preventing unauthorized transfers without their consent. The goal is simple: detect fraud early before it becomes a legal battle. Preventive measures for real estate professionals. As a professional, your responsibility is to verify, question, and confirm every step of the transaction. Client identification must go beyond surface-level checks. Multiple forms of ID, face-to-face or video verification, and consistency across documents are essential. Due diligence is equally important. Reviewing property history, conducting title searches, and identifying any irregularities in ownership or documentation can prevent fraudulent transactions from progressing. Education is another powerful tool. When you educate your clients about fraud risks and prevention strategies, you create additional layers of protection beyond your own role. Staying informed about emerging fraud tactics ensures that you are not relying on outdated practices while criminals continue to evolve. This is not extra work. It is necessary work. Preventive measures for title, escrow, and notaries. Fraud prevention is strongest when every professional in the transaction does their part. Title and escrow agents must conduct thorough title searches, verify all documentation, and ensure that any liens or encumbrances are properly addressed before closing. Notaries must strictly follow identification protocols, require valid government-issued ID, and maintain detailed records of all notarizations. Regular audits of internal processes help identify weaknesses and ensure compliance with legal standards. Each layer of verification strengthens the entire system. The role of government and regulation fraud prevention is not just an individual effort, it is a coordinated system. Government and regulatory bodies play a critical role by establishing laws, enforcing regulations, and educating the public. Stricter verification requirements, fraud reporting mandates, and enhanced documentation standards all contribute to reducing fraud opportunities. Public outreach campaigns and education programs help property owners and professionals recognize risks and take proactive steps. The more informed the public, the harder it is for fraud to succeed. Reporting suspicious activity. Acting before it's too late. One of the most important actions you can take is reporting suspicious activity. Fraud often escalates because early warning signs are ignored or not reported. Hotlines, reporting systems, and collaboration with law enforcement allow suspicious activity to be investigated quickly. The earlier fraud is reported, the greater the chance of stopping it before significant damage occurs. Silence allows fraud to grow. Action stops it, connecting it all together. At this point in the course, everything comes together. You understand how fraud works, who commits it, and how it moves through the system. Now you know how to recognize it and stop it. Fraud is not prevented by luck. It is prevented by awareness, verification, and action. And in every transaction, you have the opportunity to make that difference. Online discussion. Question 1. Why is urgency considered one of the biggest red flags in deed fraud? Answer. Because fraudsters use time pressure to prevent proper verification and push transactions through before inconsistencies are discovered. Question 2. What makes vacant or low mortgage properties attractive targets for fraud? Answer. Because they are less likely to be actively monitored and have equity that can be exploited without lender involvement. Question 3. Why is reporting suspicious activity critical in preventing fraud? Answer. Because early reporting allows authorities to investigate and stop fraud before it causes significant financial and legal damage.